these all things are referred as primitive capital accumulation. The capital accumulation which took place through plunder, occupation, grabbing, genocide, etc. And the capital accumulation through production process, that is another phenomenon which is referred as the productive process of capital accumulation. Yeah. And rent seeking is which is sort of primitive capital accumulation, sort of, which does not relate with the productive activities, without taking the advantage of political power or the connections, earning material wealth or grabbing resources. That is the rent seeking. And David Harvey, another US professor, I think he is now teaching at New York University. New York City University, yes. David Harvey's concept is accumulation by dispossession. Accumulation by dispossession. It is also a concept which, in a way, it is a continuity of Marx's idea of primitive capital accumulation. The present day world, accumulation is taking place by dispossessing people. Dispossessing. It is what he was saying in a country like Bangladesh, where people's lives are not getting any value from the powerful groups. These things are happening. This is also a part of accumulation through dispossession. All accumulation within country and globally is taking place by dispossessing people's life and livelihoods and their resources, their entitlement. All dispossession is taking place to give space to this accumulation.
And so the rent seeking is really just lubricating that.
Yeah, lubricating that, yes.
I think that what you're trying to point out, and I think that what they're trying to point out, is this connection, two hands clapping, between what goes on, whether you look at Bangladesh or any other country that's making products that are going to get exported and sold abroad. Growing up here, of course, as a child, so much of our toys, etc., and clothing and all that came from China, and now it's coming from so many other countries. And I'm a nursery school teacher director, and about 7 or so years ago, a big thing came out, and many people may be remembering that, about toys that were being sold from China that had high levels of lead in them. And I remember hearing on NPR that it was a translator, that a Chinese person who owns one of the companies that was implicated in selling leaded toys here, saying that the corporations, whatever corporations they were, that from the States, were coming in and telling the Chinese producers that you have to sell it to us for cheaper. And so with that pressure from us wanting lots of unnecessary toys for our children, and we want it cheaper, the companies there in China, and this could be generalized, I think, to other products and all over, whether it's Bangladesh, Pakistan, or anywhere else, they buckle under that to give us our cheaper things in order to be able to sell it, including they farm out to subcontractors, and they're not looking at what kind of paint these subcontractors are using, because they want to please the companies who are coming from the United States and Europe and whatever to sell it as cheaply as they can. So that's what I think they're trying to point out.
No, but
I
agree
don't
with
think
you, that's not my point.
Yes, well, I think the fact that there are workers getting
we'll get to that
burned
in the
and
more
all
discussion session,
is
please.
because the companies...
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
It was a really very simple and nice presentation. I'm giving emphasis to Dr. Anu Mohammad, actually. Sorry.
No.
Personally, I was brought up in Pakistan, actually. I'm a Bangladeshi. Now I'm an American. You have really cited out all the linkage and the existence of all corruptions and capitalism very nicely, expertly. But you did not give any direction towards the solution. what to do for, how to handle this, how to tackle it. Who is going to do it? You have said that this has to be mentioned, noticed. What is the benefit? Who is going to notice it? So, if you can give little bit duration of this, so that we common people implant this somewhere to grow it for the protection. And the other thing I would like to, there is a separate thing, I read this leaflet, it says that you had some, you're supposed to say something on the coal mine process in Bangladesh. If you have time, you can speak something on that.
The solution, I think, I believe that identifying the problems is 50% of solution. Because
I don't agree.
I also don't agree.
I mean, it's absolutely,
It's too easy.
It's a consultant's view.
We'll come back to it.
No,
we'll come back to you.
let me finish my point.
Please,
Okay.
yes.
Identifying because why? Because when people believe that the corruption is the problem, I would like to insist that corruption is a result.
Yeah.
For what? It's a policy framework. The policy framework we are living in, the what policymakers and the consultants try to make believe us what? That corruption is an isolated problem. I am saying that corruption is not an isolated problem. In referring your the people's struggle in Bangladesh, the who can change the present scenario? The people who are the victims or who are the losers.
Yeah.
If they are capable of understanding the linkage of the problems, then only they can solve it. The beneficiaries of this problem, beneficiaries of this policy framework will not change this scenario. We cannot solve this problem by round table conference, taking all corrupt and beneficiaries of these policymakers. So what is then the future? Future is to reach and to understand and to explain the corruption linkages and networks to the people so that they can identify to fight the causes. For example, natural resources in Bangladesh, the gas resources, coal resources, what you are referring to. There was a model for the multinational corporations, very ideal model. There are countries in Africa, especially Nigeria. This is a Nigerian model, we know about that. This is so Joseph Stiglitz he recently said that this is a resource curse model. The resource abundance in countries like these peripheral countries make these resources a curse. Because of this resource, they have to face militarization, they have to face conflict, they have to face bombs, they have to face all sort of corrupt ruling and all these sort of aggression, grabbing and bad deals. So in order to get rid of all these things, what only people can change it. And in Bangladesh, I can say that in the last 10 to 12 years, the people's movement to deal with these issues on natural gas and coal mining, etc. People had made the difference. Their struggles, their understanding, their realization of their own resources. Because if people understand that this is their life, this is their resource, they are the owner of these resources, and these resources should be used for their own benefit, not for any corporate profit, then if people are convinced about that, people can take a stand. And this people's struggle made the difference between Nigeria and Bangladesh. Nigeria model was, there were people, there were governments and the corporations, tried to put Bangladesh in a resource caste model, people's struggle made a big difference between Nigeria and Bangladesh, and there were all corruptions involved. Why a country, when I can purchase 1,000 cubic feet of gas by 30 taka, why I should buy at 300 taka? This is not at all commonsensical. Any primary school student will say that this is not at all rational. But who say this rational? World Bank say this rational because they say that this foreign direct investment will help you to reduce public debt. It will help you to get you development. It will help you to get you electrified, power crisis, solve power crisis, etc. But what is happening? We are purchasing gas from multinational corporations at 10 times more price. That deal, how can we explain this type of deal without corruption? Without corruption, this cannot be explained. But when people resisted, people challenged, then this deal could not continue, and there are many differences like stopping gas. They could stop gas resources. That could be a huge disaster for Bangladesh if they could export that gas. And stopping this open pit disastrous coal mining, which was agreement was, it is called development project, and it is even today the World Bank, IMF, ADB, US Embassy are pushing for this project. Which was the project? Bangladesh would get 6% royalty. There will be open pit mining. 80% coal would be exported, and rest 14% Bangladesh would buy in international price. Then coal will be because of this mining, fertile land will be lost, underground and surface water will be lost, and millions of people will lose their livelihood. So, land, water, fertile land, people, everything is gone, and then coal is also gone because of that contract. This contract, people stop this project. So that is why people stopped it. Why could people stop it? Because people could realize, people could understand, and people had a sense of ownership with their resources and with their land, with their water resources. So people had their strength, could get their strength against the ruling parties, their military power, their international power, multinational power, everything. They could fight the corrupt people. So there is, I only keep my hope on that. This people understanding, realization, and their struggle. That is where I would like to insist.
Can I just add, I mean, even though I know it was interactive with me, but what I wanted to say is, even though we focused a lot on some of the things, there are within Pakistan, within Bangladesh, within this country, everywhere where these problems are impacting the lives of many people. There are many movements and many successful incidents of fighting, and as Dr. Mohammad was saying, fighting back and keeping these multinational corporations out or limiting their access to things. So it's, even though with that kind of power and that kind of capital, it's difficult to fight back from grassroots. That is happening, and that is certainly, taking it sort of more globally. There's a big divestment and boycott campaign against Israeli products, for example, and things along those lines where people, every individual can make some sort of contribution by doing those kind of things. But yes, those stories of success are few and far between, though. Because
I'm walking out. I'm not going to deal with bigots like you, lady.
Good goodness.
All right.
See, let me respond to him. Now he has left.
I have a follow-up comment.
And I really think I should, because I will forget that
Okay,
he's
all right.
Go ahead.
very
All right, go ahead.
relevant.
Go
Yes,
ahead.
say it.
Okay, with all due respect to the guy who left very disrespectfully. So, but what he said is a question that I, as a student and an activist in India, come across a lot. And I'm answering as a generation which inherited a very neoliberal India, a very committedly neoliberal India, okay? So when he says that the political system needs to change, he's forgetting that in this, we have discussed the corporates, the people who benefit, and we have discussed the government system. But there is a third player, right? There are the people. And And when you say that they don't understand that their system needs to change, you are wrong, because people understand. They know very well that if their governments were not corrupt, these companies could not come in and ruin the entire socio-economic fabric. But the problem is, one, there is an incentive that these companies provide to our governments to not put in checks and balances, against which we as people struggle. I have been an activist for 10 years, and I know that it's very difficult to get the governments to listen because there is pressure and there is incentive. So it's very important to understand that these problems are linked. And secondly, people's struggles are not, it's not easy to organize or mobilize people. I'm also part of the middle class of the generation which is benefiting from the growth, IT-led growth and white-collar job generation in India. It's not easy to bring all these people together. You distract the middle class by offering this kind of incentives, while at the same time, what's the word for it? Marginalizing, disenfranchising a whole section of my own generation. So it's important to understand that this corruption, this kind of economic growth, this paradigm, and people's struggles to dismantle this kind of an economic system are very much interlinked, and it's not possible to talk about one thing without talking about the other. And I am not a student yet here, but I know there are my friends who have these white-collar jobs, my friends who want these white-collar jobs but can't have them simply because they cannot speak English as well as I do, for example. And there are people like me who are struggling to go from science to social science and become an activist because they see a problem. And the problem is this, that this economic growth paradigm promises a lot, delivers a lot for some people, and takes away everything from a whole lot of others. So the linkage has to be understood, because we cannot organize, we cannot resist this kind of a system, because we can't see that it's a problem for all of us. So this division and distancing is a very important part of this problem. So that is one thing. And the other thing is, it's also easier to say that just outlining the problem is not important, that it's not good enough. Again, as a citizen, as an activist, and a student, I would say that it's very important, it's most important, because for example, there is a big anti-corruption movement in India, which has gone haywire, but it was mostly this liberal middle class led movement. And on the other hand, there is a very radical sort of movement for right to education, which is against the neoliberal reform in education and is asking for very radical structural changes in the entire economic and educational system. And we try to bring to attention to the attention of this anti-corruption movement that what you're talking about is just part of and a symptom of the bigger problem. And so you also have to look at the corrupt policies and the entire policy framework which encourages this sort of corruption and profiteering for a small section. So saying that understanding the problem is not important is wrong, because it's people's struggles which can deal with, any solution is going to come from the people. And for people to understand the problem correctly, it's important, because 10 people in one university campus are saying that no, we don't want you to support sanctions against Iran, we don't want you to support Israel, or we don't want you to support privatization of private education. 10 people are nothing. They're nothing. We are a country of more than 1 billion. And a whole other section of my generation goes and says that you're fools, you're distracting, you're ruining our exams. We have exams, we have to study, and you're disrupting the entire system because you're making these unreasonable demands. So understanding the problem is important. For me to know what the next step is going to be, or to convince other people in my generation that, you know what, this is not a problem for those people, some 5 fishermen who are opposing the nuclear power plant, or some stupid people who don't understand that mega projects or hydro projects are important. It's not just their problem, it's our own problem, and we are benefiting from it in some way. So all that.
I'll come back to you because some other people have to ask questions. Abha.
Well, thank you very much for clarifying how the global circuits of corruptions work. And I think one of the things that this discussion has pointed out is precisely when people say that there is knowing is not a problem. In fact, knowing is the major barrier, because we saw here the inability of people to actually look at those global circuits of corruption by going back to a very colonial mindset, which always posits, the Europeans, the Westerns, as somehow superior to the third world. You see, that is the underlying question here, because as the West was plundering, colonizing the world, as it was very much in favor of slavery, it talked about, equality, fraternity, and egalitarian.